Okay, so today I am reviewing the book Aubade, which is a novel by M.K. Weaving, as you can see right here. And some info on the back here. You can all find that online, I assume. So I've got some notes here, and we're going to start with the introduction. So let's see what we got, because I got some thoughts on this book, for sure. Okay, so as an introduction, this book was released on April 16th of 2025. It's 326 pages, and the age range is not specified, I don't think, but I would say teenager up is probably appropriate. It's science fiction. I wouldn't call it sci-fi fantasy by any means because, some things are, like, for example, Star Wars is like sci-fi, but it's also a fantasy. This book is, it's purely sci-fi, in my opinion. It's not necessarily hard science fiction, but it doesn't have fantasy elements that some other science fiction does. In terms of inspiration, I don't know what inspired the writer necessarily, but I can tell you that I drew some parallels between this and the films Gattaca, Equilibrium, and of all things, actually, The Searchers, even though The Searchers is a Western. Some parallels there, really just in terms of theme. But I guess that's just like my opinion. So anyway, let's see. Moving on from the introduction, let's go to... So now, for the setting, there's a spaceship and there's a colony, and there's some memories and flashbacks of Earth. That's primarily where the setting is. It's a sci-fi, setting. So there's that. Okay, in terms of characters, the primary POV character is named Sarah, although I believe the book is told in terms of, the POV is third-person omniscient. So you kind of, get different, you get introspection and insight into the minds and thoughts of other characters as you go along. Some of the other characters are Vince, Jack, some guy named Stapleton. There's Peter, who is the husband of Sarah, but they've been separated and she doesn't know where he is. There's actually quite a lot of characters, a lot of side characters in this particular book. Sometimes the banter between them was pretty good. But there's too many to name, really. There's quite an ensemble cast, I guess, you could say. My fingers are sticking together here. All right. So the plot. All right, so the premise the starting point of the plot is that Sarah wakes up on a spaceship. There's some mystery elements because she doesn't know how she got there. It's a pretty good setup. I wouldn't call the mystery elements noir or anything like that, but it does have a lot of mystery to it. There's a sort of a conflict between like the olden ways and these people from the coast, but it's not really explained at first. You kind of have to, I guess, read between the lines. And there's a civilian force, or rather a civilian population, and then there's a defensive force that's there, I guess, to protect them. And they're in separate shelters within the same colony, or I guess you could say separate colonies. And so the setup of the plot is that there's a lot of tension between these two teams or groups of people who don't necessarily always have the same goal. So I guess that's pretty much it for the plot. Now let's see here, themes. So some of the themes that I think I picked up on were the idea of like the older ways versus the new ways, and emotion versus synthetics, and then the defensive force versus the civilians. And really, that's where I drew a lot of parallels between this and those films I mentioned earlier. Like, for example, there's like a synthetic drug or hormone, or I guess it's a synthetic injection of some sort that most of the civilians take, and it suppresses their emotional reactions, which kind of reminded me of Equilibrium, if you've seen that film. And there's also like an old way versus the new way, in that there's like, I think most of the civilians, they actually have been genetically engineered or genetically enhanced in some way, or, something like that. And that reminded me of Gattaca, if you've seen that film. Like in the future, they're like, life is not really conceived naturally. It's like engineered in a lab. And the Defense Force versus the Civs, in some ways, the reason I mentioned the Searchers earlier was that in the Searchers you have this idea that there are people like John Wayne's character in that film, which, spoiler alert, the film came out like 70 years ago or something. But, oh shoot, my air conditioning's coming on. Hang on a second. Sorry, I forgot to turn that off. It's really loud. But in The Searchers, John Wayne's character is portrayed as a guy who's like almost brutal in a way, and that his brutality is necessary to create civilization, but not to sustain it. And he's not really welcome there. And in some ways, I wondered if the defense team is actually kind of like, being made to portray something that's kind of like left over among human instincts or human emotion, and that there's like a brutal aspect of humanity that, while it might be necessary to create a colony world that way, although ironically on this world they, spoiler alert, I don't think they find any hostile alien life or anything like that. But it's sort of like a leftover aspect of ourselves. There's like a primitive caveman or cavewoman subconscious mind within all of us. That while it's necessary to create civilization with that, it doesn't actually have a place among civilized people, I guess. Or at least that's what I thought. I don't know. I'm not entirely sure. Anyway, let's see here. So, inside the author's studio. So, I'm not sure I have too much written down here. Oh, I do. Look at that. So, M.K. Weaving is originally from Finland, but she has moved to the United States. She lives in, I believe, Florida. And that's from her Goodreads bio, so hopefully it's not private information because she made it public. And just FYI. And she likes science fiction and classic films. So, I've seen her on Substack. I know that she talks a lot about sci-fi and classic films. So, then, let's see, she also lists herself as having a skill of driving on the freeways in Florida, which, to me, that means she clearly is a very brave soul. And she has 3 books out, of course, Aubade right here, and also a book called No End Code, and one called, I think it's Errante, with like a thingy on the E at the end. I think I'm too Texan to say that correctly. It's probably French or something. Anyway, so there's that. And now we get to the critique. And so this is going to be really, really interesting to talk about, because for the critique I actually have like a separate page of notes here that's like just for the critique. And I have a little spiel here that I wrote out. This took me a while to think through, So first of all, normally I have a different spoiler section, but for this critique, I'm going to mix in some spoilers, and they're just going to be there. I couldn't think of a way to separate the critique from the spoilers. Also, I wanted to say that I am myself a writer, and I'm always nervous doing a critique of another writer because, hey, we're all in this together. But I think this is the first time I'm critiquing a science fiction novel, and I'm also a science fiction writer. So to me, this matter is extremely delicate, because I don't want to, first of all, I don't want to be one of those people that, it's all too often the case if you can't bring out the best in yourself, for some people, they instead try to bring out the worst in others, or there's the saying of cutting off the heads of other people to make yourself taller, and I'm not here for that. I'm not like that, I don't think that way, and I don't even want to come close to looking that way. And while I'm at it, I'll tell you that, when I look at my own writing, it's got to get better. It's got things I have to improve. So it's not like I'm on a high horse here. And, of course, now that I've said it, you're probably thinking like, oh, this book is terrible. No, I like a lot about this book. But I have a lot of things to talk about in terms of as a critique, a constructive critique. So I guess I could probably go on and blabber forever about that. But I should probably just cut to the chase because I don't want to, take up too much of your old time. But I guess the one thing I do want to mention, other than the fact that there's going to be spoilers in this critique, is that I almost feel like I can't actually critique this book. And the reason why is that at the end of it, I wasn't really confident that I determined what it is that the writer was really going for in terms of theme. Because the ending, which again, spoiler alert, the ending when she's reunited with her daughter, very emotional moment. And I liked it a lot. And so in terms of plot and character, it made sense, but I didn't see the overall theme that was trying to be presented. And if I were to go back to, say, Beyond the Water's Edge, for example, the first book I reviewed here on this YouTube channel, I wasn't 100% sure, because, I didn't ask the writer herself what the book meant. I did later on, because I correspond with Janine Evie as an author. But when I read it at the end, I had a pretty good idea that that book had themes of illusion versus truth and power versus the responsibility to wield it. But in this particular book, I couldn't really figure that out. And of all things, it reminded me of, like, when I was a kid, I spent a summer, like, at this farm in Maryland, of all places. And there was one of my childhood friends was there, and I remember we walked by this barn, and there was a tree there, and there was this arrow that was stuck, like, right in the middle of the tree. And I looked at that, and I was like, wow, that's a really nice shot. And then my friend John, without missing a beat, he was like, well, unless they were aiming for the broad side of the barn, in which case they missed. And I think when you read a book, as a reader or a writer, you kind of have to ask the question of, well, there's really two questions. What was the writer trying to say, and did the story constructively move the reader in that direction? And so without really knowing what's being aimed for, I can't really know if it reaches the mark or not. So anyway, I guess that's a long-winded way of me saying that I don't really know. It could be the way it was written, could be the way that I read it. And the other thing is the fact that looking at her bio and the fact that she's European, I wonder if there's actually a cultural difference for North American readers where, like, especially because I'm a Texan, maybe if it was like Transformers, I would understand it or something, if you know what I mean. But, like what's considered normal over there might be too subtle for a reader like me. And what would be considered normal for a reader like me might be like too obvious or preachy to someone else. Anyway, I'll stop going on and on with that, and I'll get to the critique here. Okay, so the first thing is that, like, the first, I'd say about 160 pages, like about the first half, it really, to me, took like until about this point to like really get going. Like, I'd say the first half of the book, it's like really a slow burn. I thought it was almost like a little too slow, to be honest. I wasn't really sure what the character was, well, I shouldn't say that I don't know what the character was going for. It's really more that she has this goal of trying to find out how she got on the spacecraft and gather more information. And I just thought it took too long for this initial setup. And I think it's that one of those weird things where it's actually like not enough, but it's also too much. And that sounds kind of weird, but I'll explain. I think a lot of the beginning could have been cut down to like, half of that, like maybe instead of 150 pages, like 75 to get to like that initial setup. On the other hand, I think that there could have been like an added goal that the character could have had that she was working towards. Because having like an initial build-up where things are, I don't know, for lack of a better word, meandering a bit. In some ways, I actually kind of like that because the character herself is waking up on board a spaceship. She has no idea what's happened. And I like the idea of actually having like a meta-narrative. In other words, the prose style and the narrative style could reflect the state of mind of the character, and she's kind of like disoriented. And I think that's actually kind of a cool idea. But I would only, if I were reading this as like a beta reader or something, I'd be like, use that idea for like the first 50 pages, not like the first 160. And the other thing I thought about, of all things, and this is going to be weird, is, well, actually it's not too weird, Revenge of the Sith, the Star Wars movie. And you're probably wondering, what does that have to do with Aubade? Don't worry, I'll tell you. I'm just using this as an example. If you watch Revenge of the Sith, the film, and spoiler alert, that's like a 20-year-old film now. Wow, it's really been 20 years since Revenge of the Sith came out. That's hard to believe. I feel really old, but I guess that's neither here nor there. Anyway, there's a scene there where Samuel Jackson tells Anakin Skywalker, well, actually, it's Mace Windu's the character. He's like, we're going to grant you a seat on the Jedi Council, but you're not going to be a Jedi Master. And Anakin throws a temper tantrum, and you're like, well, I guess he's just PO'd or, like egotistical or something. But one of my friends who's like a real Star Wars fan, like maybe a little more than I am, he told me that in the novelization of that film, there's a subplot where Anakin is trying to, again, spoiler alert, it's a 20-year-old movie, he's trying to save his wife because he has this vision that she's going to die in childbirth. And he thinks that the Jedi have some secrets hidden in this like information vault somewhere. And if he attains the rank of Master, he can access that information. And if he doesn't achieve that rank, he can't. So that actually explains his emotional reaction in a much better way because he has a goal of achieving that rank in order to gain that information. And I thought about that when I was reading the initial like first half of this book because I was like, Sarah as a character could have something like dangled in front of her like, well, she's kind of a civilian, but she's kind of working the defense team. If she got some kind of like a provisional rank or something like that, maybe she could access to some data or something like that that would help her figure out how she got here and in effect making it that way. And I thought about that with there's a point in time which was like a sandstorm and she has to take charge. And I thought that, maybe it's because I've seen a lot of Star Trek, but like you could work a moral dilemma into that with the whole like chasing the rank to achieve information thing of, well, there's a sandstorm and does she take charge to show leadership, or is it that, is it like the sandstorm knocks some guy off and he's actually like going to have to be replaced, and maybe they promote her into the role so she could leave him behind. Of course, that'd be pretty evil. Or maybe there's like civilians on the shuttle with her and she wants to go back and play hero and like save the guy to get the promotion, but she puts other people's lives at risk, and now you've got a moral dilemma. But again, I've seen too many Star Trek episodes where like the red shirts are like, oh wait here, I'll go get help, and then like some Tyrannosaurus Rex shaped oil monster jumps out and like threatens to eat him or does eat him or something like that. But I don't know, I have a weird imagination, admittedly, but something like that is like a goal for the first half. So let's see here. So the second thing I have listed here is the database cube, which I've maybe it's because I'm a software engineer, but the whole database cube death trap thing, I did not understand that. I mean, I can suspend disbelief and go with it because it's kind of cool in a way, but I do, of all things, it reminded me that back in the year 2000, I worked for this little tech company, and there was this South Korean database architect. I remember her name was Mai. And she had this, I think it was like an entire wall with this database thing she was trying to work out. I almost wonder if MK Weaving has like a background in software because, databases are like, back in the day, still today, they're like they can be so archaic almost to work with. I wonder if that was like some sort of inside joke. But in terms of a science fiction story, I didn't really understand how anyone in the world would design a database that way. But maybe I missed something, I don't know. But the world building itself, the whole thing with like the emotions and the old and the coast, I thought it was really just too understated. And what I mean by that is, I think there's like a point of contention where people are supposed to be taking these emotion suppressing medications. But Sarah, I don't believe, is on them. I think she has some like genetic condition or something where she's like immune, or they don't affect her or something along those lines. And one of the things I remember about Equilibrium is that it establishes right away what the stakes are for people who don't take the emotion suppressing drugs, which is that I think it's like the Gamerton or Grammaton clerics or whatever, hunt them down almost like Judge Dredd style, and they like massacre them. It's almost like, I think the opening of that film was almost like Waco 2.0. Anyway, sorry if that if that's a trigger or anything for anyone. I'm a Texan, I understand, but it's like you see the stakes of it, and I don't think that it was really clearly communicated to me, at least to me, like what the stakes are of her not either being able to or not willingly taking those medications. But I guess the other thing I noted here was actually that between the shelters of the civilian and the defense team, I really wondered if there could have been more of like a visual motif that was different. And recently I was rewatching, of all things, Hunt for the Red October, the film. And one of the things they do really well in that film is that, it's not a book, it's a film, of course, so it's a little bit different, but they use a different color scheme and like a different sort of like subtle design change, because in that film you have actually the interiors of 3 different submarines are shown at different times. And just from like the colors and the lighting, before you even see the people on them, because the certain characters are on one submarine as opposed to another, you have a very clear visual motif that indicates which submersible that scene takes place on, and you can subconsciously identify it very quickly. It's very well done. And I really wondered here for the world building if like the different shelters should have had some sort of difference, and it could have been something as basic as like the defense team is like a very rigid structure, like very rigid people. And if you walk inside, is it like the layout is has a lot of right angles, a lot of sharp right angles to it? Is it very like rigid in structure, as opposed to like if you go to the civilians where they're like way more laid back, or at least relative to the other one? Is it more of like there's lots of circles everywhere and soft edges and stuff like that? So I didn't really pick up on that. I kind of wish that was done, but again, I think part of this critique just in general is the fact that I have to accept the fact that the author wrote the book that she wanted to, not me. And I'm a writer, I've seen that from the other perspective. But anyway, that was just a thought that I had, I guess. So the big question mark I have here is really about the themes and what they are. And I'm going to guess based upon what I think was being the objective was here. And one of them is that the human emotion versus the suppression of emotions. And I think that actually came up at one point in time in like the third act when Sarah was able to design like a shuttle, and someone makes a remark about like what was it? Something about how like the people on the emotion suppressant drugs didn't have the creativity to do something like that. And so I wondered if like the theme there that was trying to be shown was that suppressing human emotion actually, suppresses an aspect of humanity, creativity, the will. Like emotions can be dangerous, but by suppressing them, they also, in some ways, deny who we are. And that's actually a really good theme. But I thought it was too understated. And I wondered if, like, it would have worked perhaps better if that was worked into the ending in some way, because Sarah helps with that design to get that shuttle modified, which is what allows her to be reunited with her daughter. And I wondered if, the Sarah should have been really presented with a choice at that point. Like if it had been discovered at that point that she had in fact like not been taking the right drugs to suppress her emotions, and she was given a choice to, and by denying that and retaining her emotions, she was then able to make that design and then be reunited with her daughter. I don't know. I thought that would have like maybe clarified the theme a bit more, but I'm not entirely sure. There's also like the old versus the new, like Gattaca, and Sarah being the librarian reminded me kind of The Giver in a way, but I think it really reminded me more of Gattaca, the storyline. And at one point in time, there's a bridge that's constructed between the civilian and the defensive camps or shelters, and I thought that Sarah was really representative of that in a way, because she's like between the two teams. There's also a love triangle involving, I think, personnel from the two different sides. And I remembered, 2010, not the year, but the film with Roy Schneider. It's the sequel to 2001: A Space Odyssey, where there's the two spaceships, and then there's like a bridge they have between them, but then Russia and America go to war because like one of the ships is Russian and, Soviet Union, and then the other one is American, and they like sever the bridge, and it's really symbolic of like the philosophies going their different way and humanity fighting itself. But I don't know. I guess that's what it was going for. And then, you have the defense versus the civilians, and I don't have too many notes there for that. Let's see here. But I guess I didn't see the theme or the thematic variation that was really being strived for. I just didn't pick up on it. And I think just in general, the third act with the love triangle, I think that would have worked better as like the second act. Again, like the beginning of this book could have been like, it could have been moved up in the sequence of events. And that could have actually then been like the thing that separates the camps, and then the mysterious signal is the thing that brings them together. I think that might have worked a little bit. I mean, I don't know. I'm just throwing out ideas. Again, this is a critique. I'm just throwing out ideas of what I think. So now there is one thing that happened in the third act where when this mysterious signal shows up, there's like, I guess, some concern over like where it's coming from. Because I mean, it could be anything. It could be hostile humans, pirates. Well, I don't know if pirates exist in this world. Could be aliens. I mean, it could be anything. But when it reaches like what I would consider the climax of the story in some ways, there's a lot of tension around this signal being detected and where it is. And a lot of the tension was really, it's like that question of do you show or do you tell? And a lot of it was told instead of shown. And then there was like a moment of levity where they make a joke in the cafeteria that's like reducing the tension. And I thought that the way that was done, to me, it just sort of seemed like, it really to me seemed like the levity being shown instead of told and the tension being told instead of shown, it kind of like, it diffused the situation before it really reached like a good like amount of tension. And, again, that's just my opinion, I suppose. In my opinion, I would have been like, you gotta, at that point, third act, you're reaching the climax, you should be showing as much as possible, like show the reactions. People are panicking, like in the cafeteria, they're like fighting each other over food, I mean, if y'all remember the beginning of 2020, there were folks fighting over toilet paper, for Pete's sake. But anyway, again, my opinion, just my opinion. So, let's see, the next thing I have here is just a general note that like the signal, the old versus the new, the coast, the mystery. I thought that it took quite a while for it to develop. It was just, I mean, I know it's a slow burn, as they say. I just thought it was a little too slow. It kind of reminded me of like way back in 1997, the first time I made pasta. I watched a pot of water boil before putting pasta in it. And it only took 15 minutes, but I thought it was like an hour. Now, 1997 isn't a bad year, unless you were in the Hong Kong stock market as an investor. But, I just think it took just a little too long, my opinion. Let's see here. And I guess the other thing I noted here was that I thought that the mysterious signal really should be freaking out like the military guys. Like, I don't, I mean, if you're on a planet, maybe it's because, a long time ago I knew some folks who were in the military, and I just think that, like, if any of them, just as like a characterization thing, like if there was some signal they didn't know what it was, like, they would be like really doing a lot to find out the origin of what was going. Like if they were in a situation they didn't know something like that, they would find out. They would be very motivated to find out. I thought that they took, given the fact that, given their situation especially, they're on a colony, they're far from Earth and help. Like, I thought that they should really be like borderline freaking out over it. But let's see here. I guess the other thing I note here is the fact that, I think I kind of talked about this earlier, the ending really, how does that tie into themes? Because I really like the idea of the mother and daughter being reunited. I don't know how that ties into really like a choice that the character makes that reflects the theme or one of the themes that the book is about. And it could, again, admittedly, it could be there and maybe I just missed it, but the same goes, again, like I said at the beginning, the same goes for everything I'm saying here. So, let's see here. I think that's most of what I have for that particular item. And then, number 9. Okay, I have a section at the end here that just says good things. And I like the love triangle. I thought that the theme about human emotion versus suppression was kind of cool. I did like the fact that there was like family, there was a brother-in-law, and that was a really good twist. I like that a lot. I like the fact that Sarah as a character is in a situation where she's someone. Oh shoot! Sorry, it's my alarm. Sorry, y'all. My alarm went off. I had to edit that part out though. Anyway, one of the other good things was the fact that Sarah as a character, someone is sort of withholding information from her, and at the same time she's kind of withholding information from someone else. And I like that characterization that she's effectively, like, by omission, she is lying to and being lied to at the same time. I thought that was a pretty cool perspective to put the protagonist in. And I think one thing I noted earlier is that I did like the banter between the characters at times, and I liked a lot of the interactions. They were pretty well done. So, anyway, I guess now that I'm done saying that, I should say that, my critique here, it's not meant to discourage anyone. I did like this book more. Well, I like this book quite a lot. When it comes to science fiction, I'm very, I can't help but compare what I'm reading to the potential involved. And what I think that, but again, it's not up to me to decide what the story's about. So I did like what this author could do, and I'm really curious what she comes up with next. And I mean, she's already got 3 books out, so I mean, she's doing better than me. But let's see, something else I have here is conclusions. I think this is a good book if you like science fiction. And I think after I typed up my notes here, I looked online for some reviews, and someone said that this book does have some space opera elements to it. I think that's true. It's just, it's more sci-fi and not really fantasy. I think if you like science fiction, again, you'll like the book. And I guess that's really all I have. So oh, wait, I forgot to move the thingy. We are on conclusion. Okay. So I guess that's really all I have for this particular book. So I guess the only other thing to say at this point is like, share, and subscribe if you'd like to see more videos from me. And other than that, that's my review of Aubade, and I'm very much interested to see how other people review it, because I think there are things that I missed in this book, like I just didn't pick up on, and maybe other people are going to pick up on it a little bit better. And that's all I have for today. So that's all, y'all. Thank you for watching this video, and have a good one. Goodbye.